it do? It's your boy, King Crowder, back again with another installment of dropping some knowledge on you about things you may know and other things you may not know. Like I told you last time in my studies, doing my research like I normally like to do, it was one interesting subject talking to friends and family about that most people generally do not know. Most people do not know the perception of the transatlantic slave trade, right? So when the transatlantic slave trade occurred in America, most people think that a lot of Africans were imported to America. It's not accurate. Only 3% of the 11 million slaves that were transported from West Africa to the Americas came to North America. 97% of the remaining Africans that were enslaved ended up in South America and the Caribbean. For some math out there, for people that's not too great in math, that means roughly only 380,000 Africans touched the American base. Let that sink in for a moment. Out of the 11 million that were captured, enslaved, and forcefully shipped to America, only 300,000 touched the North American shore. So I like to think about it like this. If we know only a fraction of a percent actually came here, the perception of that many of us are not African descent is very true. Many of us come from very diverse backgrounds. Many of us come from different areas in life. So knowing your history and your genealogy about it is very important. The other misconception I want people to start doing is when you speak about that area or time period in life, make sure you use the proper words, how we got to change pronouns in current vernacular language. You must know the difference between slaved and enslaved people. When we speak about enslaved people, we have to understand that people were captured and forced to do things against their will. We have to be respectful when speaking of them because they did not choose to do those actions. They were forcibly done upon that. So they were enslaved to do labor and other costs that they were not privy to. There was the enslaver and the slave owner. The slave owner was known as the person who dehumanized the person. He had the slave work for them, and they reduced he or she to a commodity. A commodity means an item that it can be used or replaced no matter what. So when we're speaking about the historical moment, in fact, we got to be very prevalent in the words we use, also the words you may hear others use. I want you to be aware of that. So when you hear those items being speaked upon, you need to be proper in your correction and making sure your facts are always accurate. I also think it's very powerful to understand that most of the enslaved Africans of that land were most of the builders of the time. Let me say it again. Most of the ones that were captured built and created the foundation of America. How do we think all these buildings and these plantations got built, man? How do we think all these nice infrastructure and things that we see were developed and cultivated? All of the enslaved people had all the skills. They did all the work. They were the craftsmen, the carpenters, the doctors, all of it. So we have to understand the dynamic of what happened in the lands and of that time. You know, we have to educate each other to understand that they were the builders and the foundation of all wealth, all activity, and everything we take for granted until now. All of the skills and the craftsmanship was passed down through those enslaved individuals to their children and their resources and what they did. Another fact that we don't know is that the enslaved created their own language known as Tut Language. What is Tut Language? It was a way that they communicated amongst each other that the slave owners did not know. A lot of times we hear about the Negro spiritual when they sing and say directions to where you go, but they also had a way to communicate in a different tongue that they did not understand. This was a way to tell them about landmarks, where abolitionists would be, where other things they can look out for, and what other directions to head towards if a revolt or something was about to happen. One of the more important period that we must understand during this period is that a lot of these cited resources are also published by PBS, by the University of Buffalo, by the History Net, and different sources if you want to cross-check me, for example. I think another part of history that a lot of people do not know about is called the Native American history. The Native American history is a race relation-based problems we had from about 1877 until the 20th century. What is the Native part of history? It's when we had all the race relations, the riots, and the global uprisings we had among each other. What I mean by that is that don't you think about all these revolts, these fightings, these situations happen? These enslaved people didn't just lay down and let it happen. All the mans fought back. They all determined their own. They fought against. They stood up. They spoke themselves. So they had their own style. I know a lot of times we undermine that and we may not see the powerful vision behind that. But when we hear this thing about they just laid down and let it happen, it is inaccurate. The accuracy of it is that most people from that time and era, being the enslaved individuals, fought back 100% of the way. They fought back, they spoke with pride, with accuracy, and they always were respected for individuals. We must understand that during that period, it was the height of racism. It was the height of death, lynching, segregation, convict leasing, which we went over prior. All of those situations came around during that period just because the races of each other. A word that we never talk about in history or things we do not learn is how white rage was so pivotal during the Nadir period. I'm going to drop a gem out there. It's a book that I'm actually reading right now called The Lies Told to Me Throughout History. It was written by a white gentleman. Died last year, matter of fact. And the historical facts that we do not discuss on how the presidents were so pivotal in it. One point I would like to point out that's kind of counteracted to where we at right now. Throughout history, many of the Democratic side of government were mostly the Dixiecrat and most of the racist people involved. Around that time during the Watergate scandal, it flipped. Historically, Southern Dixiecrats and Democrats were mostly against progress. The Republicans were for race relations, reconstruction, and building it up. It's kind of a bit of history that most people don't know about or think about because you think about the current system of the Republican Party and how politics is viewed now. But knowing the history of the social values and how the American construct was broken down is an essential part that we need to learn. So let's recap it one more time. We need to know the difference between an enslaved, slave, master, and how many Africans were actually transported here during the slave and trade slave. Another important component that I urge everyone to look up on, I'll drop some links so that you can read, is about the Nadir period in American history. 4 pivotal things that we all need to research and know about when we speak about race relations and the social construct that America was founded upon. Because America was founded upon certain principles that make it so profitable and what it is today. Race influences every part of our society until this moment. But once we can reconstruct that, view it layer by layer, that's how the progress begins to grow. I think all of these topics are incredibly special. I think we should dive into them and listen. And I would definitely urge everyone to study and remember our people perish the most because of our lack of knowledge. This is your boy King Crowder checking in once again. I want to thank you for the opportunity for watching the video. If you have any more questions for me, please leave some comments below. I would also like for you to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have anything you want me to dive into, I'm more than willing to do that. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday. Peace.